Morning, Zoe. Got donuts.
Jeff Bridges, why are you still living above our garage?
Well, I dig the mattress, and I want to be in a T-Mobile commercial like you. Teach me, Saldana.
Oh, no, I'm not really prepared. I couldn't possibly. At T-Mobile, get the new iPhone 17 Pro on them. It's designed to be the most powerful iPhone yet and has the ultimate pro camera system.
Wow, impressive. Let me try. T-Mobile is the best place to get iPhone 17 Pro because they've got the best network.
Nice, Jeffrey.
You heard them. T-Mobile is the best place to get the new iPhone 17 Pro on us with eligible trade-in in any condition.
So, what are we having for lunch?
Dude, my work here is done.
The 24 monthly bill credits on Experience Beyond for well-qualified customers plus tax and $35 device connection charge. Credits end and balance due if you pay off early or cancel. Finance agreement iPhone 17 Pro, 256 gigs, $1,099.99 and new line minimum $100 plus a month plan with auto pay plus taxes and fees required. Best mobile network in the U.S. based on analysis by Ookla Speed Test Intelligence Data 1H2025. Visit T-Mobile.com.
This is Good Morning Liberty.
Well, hello again, Liberty lovers. Welcome to another exciting interview on Good Morning Liberty. My name is Josh Martins, and joining me once again is Lora Karch. Now, Lora is a Mideast History and Peace Fellow at with Young Voices and an independent analyst focused on national security and political issues of the Middle East and Europe regions. She works at the Middle East Institute in Washington, D.C., and is passionate about things like individual liberties, fostering peace, safeguarding legacies for ancient civilizations. Her work has appeared in the National Interest, the Libertarian Institute, Free the People, Real Clear World, and the Times of Israel. So she has stacked up quite a resume here. But Lora, welcome back to the show. It's great to see you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, definitely. So now you recently wrote a piece in Real Clear World that I found really, really interesting. And it was just a really good take on how the relations between the U.S. and Russia could really stabilize different regions, not just the Eastern European area with Ukraine, but also how it would really spread out through the regions of the Middle East and other areas that really would help stabilize all those kind of areas. So I really wanted to talk to you about that because I found that piece really fascinating. Unfortunately, a lot has happened since you wrote that piece. So I think where we should start is just, why don't you give the listeners an update on where we are in this process with the Ukraine and Russia peace process since the kind of Trump-Putin conference in Alaska. What has happened since then, and where do we sit today?
So, yes, I would love to dive in. So the most recent Alaskan summit took place in August, where it was more of a revival of U.S.-Russian communications. The result was overall positive, at least from Putin's end. He was open to meetings with Zelensky, and it was simultaneous with the ongoing turbulence in Syria and the greater Middle East. But most recently, as you mentioned, it seems that President Trump has flipped. She most recently warned Putin that if he didn't wrap up the war, ASAP, that he would supply Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles, which are long-range missiles that can reach Moscow. Again, if Putin doesn't settle the war soon. Of course, Putin responded to this, warning against this, saying this is a dramatic escalation. These Tomahawk missiles can possibly hold nuclear power, so that does make it an escalation for his sake. The Trump bit back and said, well, the U.S. is sharing intel to help Ukraine hit some of Putin's energy sites right now in Russia, which I believe in the last week or so, there have been 4 Ukrainian attacks on Russian oil facilities. And of course, we can assume that these are U.S. supplied missiles and can very much lead to gas shortages in Russia. So that's not good.
Yeah. Now, do you think this is just maybe a flex of the muscle of Trump to try and move the process along? Because it definitely seems to have stalled. And I guess I don't know the players well enough to know where the stall started. It could have started on the Russian side. It could have started on the Ukraine side. Both have I guess in the past, from what I've seen, both have found it very easy to stall things out. Do you think this might just be Trump trying to flex his muscle to jumpstart the process, or is this just Trump being Trump and flipping on a dime like he tends to do?
I do think this is it's been a back and forth for a while now, since the summer. And, most recently it's escalated the most. And I do think it's a way for Trump to gain more leverage, to kind of say, to flip it back on him and say, well, for example, I'm going to supply Ukraine with these missiles if you don't end the war immediately. So I would call it a facade of control, as an illusion of control. But, in the end, I think Putin has very much proven that he can go rogue. And it's not a good look, I think, for President Trump to continue these public comments rather than, open a diplomatic channel again and get those talks going. Yeah,
definitely. Well, I hope that we can, reverse course, especially with some of the peaceful successes that we're having on the Israeli and Gaza front, at least this week. And I definitely want to get to that later on. But so I hope that President Trump and his team is able to shift gears and focus more on the Russia-Ukraine war, because I really want to see all these conflicts come to an end. It just, too many innocent people are hurting for whatever political reasons these are. But so I'm hopeful that the talks can get started again. Now, I want to get back to your piece because I really found it interesting, your take on why it's important that we did start up these diplomatic talks with Russia, and how this does affect other nation states. So I want to take a few minutes to just talk about how this spreads out to other nations. And let's start with Syria, because this is one that you have talked to us in depth on, and obviously you have a lot of knowledge on. How does it help Syria to have the U.S. and Russia having a diplomatic relationship, especially in this turbulent time that we're seeing in Syria?
So I'll begin with a more general picture. So my main argument in the article was basically that we need to re-engage in pragmatic diplomacy with Russia. Of course, we can't take Putin for his word all the time. But I do believe that if we can make deals here and there, they can eventually lead to stability in the Middle East. In regards to Syria, I believe it would help reduce some of the proxy conflict that are happening. And this would balance the U.S. interests without using even more of the military resources that we already are. And Russia has already played a minimal buffer role in Syria, between the Israeli bombing of Damascus during the government forces attack on the minorities. So we already know that he's sort of willing to play that role. Other ways that we can kind of influence the Russian role in Syria would be, make a deal for them to hold the new government accountable for minority protections. As we've seen, the attacks on the Alawites in March 2025 were over 1,200 Alawites were just killed just for being associated with Assad. Some of them, or some of the ones that got away, ended up seeking refuge in the Russian Khmeimim air base near southeast Latakia. So again, Putin had shown that he is willing to protect minorities. And I think we can take it a step further. It's not going to be the best of relationships, but having that dialogue and having that back and forth of asking him, or, even making a deal in regards to the Ukrainian conflict, and ask him to be kind of an intermediary to prevent direct clashes and proxy wars. Maybe he can also help preserve the deconfliction zone with Israel in the south. Just gradual political reform instead of renewal of war and feeding that fire war that keeps coming up. We should keep in mind that Russia still supplies over 90% of Syria's arms. So, although that doesn't translate into direct control over the new Syrian government, it certainly can help influence decisions that the new cabinet would make, at least in the context of Israel as well, and Iran, and by extension to Israel, Gaza, what's happening there. So there's a lot of opportunity there, in my opinion, and I know that might be an idealistic conclusion, but I choose to be cautiously optimistic as well. So.
Mint is still $15 a month for premium wireless. And if you haven't made the switch yet, here are 15 reasons why you should. 1, it's $15 a month. 2, seriously, it's $15 a month. 3, no big contracts. 4, I use it. 5, my mom uses it. Are you playing me off? That's what's happening, right? Okay, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, $15 per month equivalent required. New customer offer for 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Well, I think one of the key points that I got from your article is just the idea of having that dialogue. And we've talked in the past of just how messy the Syrian conflict really was throughout the years, and how you had Turkish forces, you had American forces, you had Russian forces, you had, all the different domestic forces that were all fighting each other. And so just having that kind of a dialogue can also, for lack of for lack of anything else, prevent some kind of escalation you don't want to prevent with one of those other states, right? So just having that alone and moving from the kind of Biden era of no diplomacy, no talking, can't discuss things with Putin, to an era of, okay, well, at least we're going to have some kind of dialogue. I think it's just a more stabilizing way of doing it in general, I guess. And I do agree with you that having another partner that has a interest in that region, especially because it's much closer to their borders, they are trade partners with them, having somebody who has those kind of interests and being able to have dialogue with them to help stabilize that region can only be a good thing. Obviously, Russia and the U.S. don't have a great diplomatic relationship, but having no diplomatic relationship doesn't help anything. And I think that was a really key point that you were making in your piece that definitely rings true in that country, in that region. I kind of want to shift gears just for a little bit and step away from the U.S. and Russia and just talk about Syria, because a lot has happened since we last talked in Syria as well. We've seen a lot of kind of internal violence and strife within Syria as the new government is establishing itself, and it really has been kind of concerning, some of the things that we've heard coming out of there. So why don't you give the listeners an update of kind of where we're at and what we're seeing when it comes to the Syrian front?
So the situation, as you mentioned, is literally still changing as we speak and evolving. But as of now, I like to call it a brewing sectarian civil tension. Not civil war yet. I really hope it doesn't get to that point. But I do believe it's because, there was another vacuum created by the fall of Assad. And this is the natural power struggle that came after. The main one in the last week has been between the autonomous regions, SDF, Syrian Democratic Forces versus government forces, new government forces. And a quick summary of that is that the government doesn't want to recognize the SDF's autonomous region as its own state because it's fear of secession. But there are talks now, I think in the last 48 hours or so, that they may accept an autonomous region as an integrated province. And again, as we speak, the SDF forces are starting to integrate into the government military forces. So I'm not really sure. I haven't seen anything concrete about that yet. But one of their representatives did come on France 24 in the last 2 days and said the more tricky details haven't really been discussed yet. And there will be more meetings organized soon between the SDF and government to just keep this truce holding. The recent clashes that we saw was allegedly due to a prisoner swap gone wrong. I'm not sure if I believe that completely, but I'm going to be monitoring the situation to see what it becomes. On the official side, the new government and interim president Shara, he wants to shift from a tribal Syria, in his words, to a unified one. And one way they're trying to do that is that they're claiming to allow Kurds now some parliamentary seats. But again, I haven't seen anything concrete on this. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the next week with that, given the most recent elections. I think there were some local elections that were happening. But since March 2025, the Alawite killings and the minorities that followed, we saw Sueda, what happened there between government forces and the Druze. And of course, that was when Israel got involved as well, bombed Damascus as a warning, because, there are, Israel does have some ethnic Druze as well, and there's the connection there. And, of course, that's a good thing in my book when you're protecting minorities. We also saw Interim President Shara attend UN General Assembly Week back in New York. I believe it's been 2 weeks now, where Shara met with several global leaders. He was hosted by some institutions, including my own, Middle East Institute. And he also shook hands with a bunch of global leaders, including Trump and others. In my eyes, those were a bunch of just formalities that kind of, again, he's trying to legitimize his government while everyone seems to be overlooking the massacres that are happening across the country. It was both Concordia and the Middle East Institute who hosted him in New York. And, I was graced with the opportunity to attend the Middle East Institute event. And I can say that he did just reiterate and regurgitate what he's been saying in the media in his most recent interviews, is that, I'm not looking for escalation. I just want investment in my countries. I want to reestablish ties with the West, and he wants to de-escalate. But again, I wrote a piece on this in the National Interest where, those claims do not match what is on the ground or what's happening on the ground right now. And he also referred to the killings by covering it as them bringing Assad loyalists to justice, which completely made my blood boil. But again, fast forward to his claims of rebuilding a new Syria, having rights for all. Again, not the reality on the ground. There's been a series of mass killings up until even today of Druze, Alawites, Christians. And we're not seeing that in the mainstream media, but, thankfully for Twitter, or X, as Elon calls it, we are seeing this, the citizen journalist aspect of this. And there are more Syrian cabinet officials actually coming to DC this week, but they're for more private meetings, from my understanding. So other than that, there's been an alleged truce and ceasefire implemented between the SDF and the government. And right after those clashes, one significant move was the U.S. sending U.S. Special Envoy Tom Barrack responding with a visit with SDF, their leaders, and as well as the new interim president Shara and his new cabinet. So, and he was also followed by a SATCOM visit as well in Damascus. So we'll see what happens there. Again, I'm cautiously optimistic. I think that's going to be the theme for this conversation. And, I hope for the best, but preparing for maybe some more clashes here and there, in my view.
Sure. Well, what obviously what he's saying, like you said, the rhetoric is not matching what we're seeing on the ground. If he truly does want to unify the country and get beyond this tribalism and get to a more unified Syria where it's, I guess maybe I'm putting words in his mouth and I shouldn't do that, but sounds like he's trying to say that he would respect the different cultures and the different groups within Syria. What does he need to do then to get beyond this internal violence that we're seeing? Like, what? Because he may be saying the right things, but what actions does he need to do to get beyond that and to get a more peaceful Syria on the ground?
And in my own personal opinion, I'm not sure he can do much Given his history, I was watching an interview earlier, and the interviewer called it a strong history, which is such an understatement. But, I think we can directly look at his cabinet. Who did he pick? How many women are there? How many minorities are there? Is it just for show? There's one female on there, and her only responsibility, her name is Ken Kabawad. She's responsible for the social aspect of the country, social arts, things like that, which is, great, but that seems to be a little gender role there. And, I don't think he can prove more than he has already tried to prove to us, that he is an open, reformed terrorist. And given right after Anga Week, he actually decided to make his first trip after UNGA was back to Idlib, which was the hub for HTS, for his terrorist group. And he made claims such as, we are finally going to get justice, and we are finally, things that are not very forward thinking, in my opinion. It's more of, we finally reached the top, and it sounds more like a claim of we're going to take over Syria instead of we're going to make Syria great again, or we're going to rebuild. So it's something I'm going to keep an eye on, and I think the world should keep an eye on, because I don't want to be a cynic, but it doesn't seem to be over between the different sects. And, unfortunately, he's just pretending that it's not happening, and the West is going with it. I'm not sure why. It baffles me that President Trump shook hands with him still. It just doesn't sit right with me, to be honest.
Gotcha.
Excuse my van.
Yeah. No, that's all right. I definitely don't think the West should go on with it, and I think the best thing he could do is to address it. But that is sometimes difficult for a new leader, especially when you would be stepping on the toes of the people that put you in power. So it's easy again for me to say that over here, where I'm not, where my life's not on the line if I did things like that. But if that is truly what he wants to make for Syria, then he's got to address the violence that he's seeing on the ground, I guess, in my opinion. I want to shift back to your article and talk about how having a stronger diplomatic relationship with Russia could affect Israel, because obviously Israel affects everything in the Middle East region. It is the one spot that causes the tension, and not always because of Israel's fault. It's just because of Israel being there and the history that we have there. Israel, it's always affecting everything in the region. And so I want to get your take on how us having a closer relationship diplomatically with Russia can affect Israel as well in the region itself, and between Israel and its neighbors.
So, yes, the Israel-Gaza question is always a tough one. I do believe, in a more ideal world, that Russia can, again, fill the role as an intermediary in the conflict. It can help with the de-escalation efforts. U.S. can make a deal with Russia to restrain Iran in that respect, and other regional partners that are against Israel historically. Preventing inflammation of Hezbollah in Lebanon right now. The military chief is desperately trying to figure out how he's going to disarm Hezbollah, and with a trip to Qatar recently. There's Hamas in Gaza. And I do believe that Russia's ties to Iran and other Arab states, he can insert himself as an intermediary for the negotiation part, maybe some humanitarian corridors, such as the Suwaida conflict in Syria. That was on the table. The Syrian government at one point publicly claimed, we're open to Putin being the neutral party here. But again, it's a very complicated, I think, conflict right now, especially with the Gaza Peace Summit that is happening today. in Egypt. And I do think everyone is cautiously optimistic at this point. And I think Putin has a real opportunity here to prove himself as well as someone who wants peace. We hear about Trump wanting to be the peace president. I do think Putin also has that potential, not in the way that, Putin's a great person, but in the more realistic way of, I think we can influence him to come to the table. One example, most recently, Putin, or I think it was Melania Trump who sent him a quote unquote peace letter regarding the Russia-Ukrainian war. And basically borderline begging him to reunify these 8 Ukrainian children with their families. And he actually acquiesced to that. And so that was one of the big headlines this week that I think can be the domino to, ask Putin for more at this point and say, what else are you interested in that the U.S. can do or make a deal with in regards to the Russian-Ukraine war that, we can also benefit from. So there's definitely room for negotiation, for real diplomacy there without using our force, without sending those tomahawks, without fueling the war. I think it's time for a détente in this realm.
Yeah, definitely. For lack of a better term, he's also experiencing war fatigue. I mean, he's been at war now for a while, and his people are getting tired too. Just as any other nation deals with. So he's got to be incentivized right now, just from that to want to make peace. But I did find it interesting how you associated us having a diplomatic tie with him can really stabilize a lot of the region. Another area that was interesting to me was the Caucasus region, where you have both Turkey, which is a strong ally of us and a NATO ally, and you have Iran, both kind of flexing their muscles there, and it would be easier and more stabilizing to have both the United States and Russia kind of both on the same side saying, nope, calm down. And I found that interesting. Tell us about, that region, what's kind of happening there a little bit, and how having that relationship could really destabilize or stabilize that kind of that region as well.
So most recently, I think a great example would be the Armenia-Azerbaijani peace that was allegedly brokered by Trump. Out of that came a deal for the Zangezur corridor, which is a corridor that connects Turkey with Azerbaijan, but they have to go through southern Armenia. And, at first, Iran wasn't happy about that. Of course, Putin as well, but he was less vocal about it. But it's an example like that of leveraging Russia's ties to Iran, that thinking, okay, if Putin were to passively respond to something like that, then maybe Iran would be a little less inflamed as well. Putin can also put some pressure to scale back Iran's proxies in Syria and Lebanon. There's the influence for disarming Hezbollah, which is we're trying to do right now. When it comes to Turkey, it's the context of Erdogan's unpredictability, because, he is technically part of NATO, but he doesn't always act like it, right? So there's that, balancing his unpredictability, because, one day he's a NATO ally and the other, the Russia, the Caucasus, that hemispheric power struggle that he gets involved in. And I think one way that a Russian diplomatic channel would help balance that is it would give U.S. a better idea of how we can de-escalate the tensions between, let's say, when it comes to Syria, between Turkey and the Kurds in northern Syria, because that's been also a factor as well. So there's a lot of ways that Russia, I do think Russia is understated. Its role is very understated in all of these conflicts but I do think Putin is smart enough to know that he is central to all these conflicts. It's just, maybe a little less overstated, but there's definitely room for a diplomatic channel between Trump and Putin to grow. And I think that should be priority, whether it's public or behind closed doors. And I think if we want to see all these conflicts kind of settle down, just like we're seeing with the Gaza Peace Summit right now in Egypt, that first step would definitely be reopening that healthy, positive communication with Putin.
Yeah, I mean, for lack of a better way of putting it, just having all the powers of the world having a dialogue, it can only stabilize the world. I mean, when the great powers are not talking at all, that's a more dangerous situation, because just like any relationship, if you're not talking and there's tension, then you're assuming something of the other side and not listening at all. So, for lack of anything else, having that dialogue is just going to stabilize the world, because you have the dialogue and you can actually talk about your differences in some capacity. Does that mean we trust Putin? No, of course not. But that is what we need to have that dialogue to get through some of those things. So I want to shift to obviously the biggest news of the week, and that is, of course, the peace talks between Israel and Gaza right now. We're a week in, so obviously when the listeners hear this, we'll be 2 weeks in, but kind of give us a rundown where we're at a week in. Are we hopeful? Is this going to, be the key ticket? Are we going to see this piece now, or is it just another one of those things that we're going to get excited and then things are going to peter out on us?
I definitely want to believe that we will see lasting peace. But going back to the Gaza peace plan, so this 20-point plan was actually announced back in January. It wasn't popular back then, but it was signed, I think, on days of this month, being Israel and Hamas. The signing ceremony was in Egypt. And the ceasefire went into effect, I think, on the 10th, where the part of the agreement was a hostage exchange. It was reportedly 2,000 Palestinians for all of the remaining Israeli hostages that are alive. And humanitarian aid would begin flowing into Gaza immediately. The long-term vision for this plan includes the disarmament of Hamas, which is, I think, what's causing the most blowback and controversy right now, because there is no defined timeline of when that will happen. And of course, I think it was 1 or 2 days ago where Hamas publicly refused to disarm unless they quote unquote, hand weapons to a Palestinian state. So I think Western leaders right now are approaching that with a cross the bridge when we get there type of mentality. And also included in this peace plan was a type of governance for the post-war for that area, where there would be a temporary committee to deal with the day-to-day. And there was a board of peace that will be chaired by Trump and other global leaders for oversight. Of course, there will be officially no occupation or annexation of Gaza at this time. And it was written that Israel would withdraw from certain key points. Regarding the Palestinian state, there is no guarantee on that, but it was said that the self-determination of Palestinians would be respected, and possible statehood would depend on how the implementation of this plan would go. So there's a lot up in the air right now that makes people cautious about getting too excited about this. But I choose to be optimistic, cautiously, of course, that, if this goes through, this can also affect the Abraham Accords. And, I was saying, I think a couple months back, that I do still think it's the opportunity to revive it and expand it is still alive and well. I think it's just going to take more time. People like Shara in Syria did say, it's possible, but I do think, money talks, economy talks, and I think in order to bring a new, efficient, and effective and successful Middle East, that, there's going to need to be some kind of accord there.
I want to ask, because I've been hearing some reports on this, and I honestly don't know if this is just people making stuff up on Twitter, which they tend to do, or if this is real. So I wanted to ask you. So are we still seeing violence in Gaza on a smaller scale, or is the ceasefire holding? Like, are we still seeing clashes between the two, or is it pretty well that the ceasefire is holding right now?
So up until an hour ago, I did see that it was holding up, the ceasefire is holding up, but shortly after signing, I think there was a minor flash firepower, but while Trump was on Air Force One, and he was having a gaggle with the media on board, and they asked him about it, and he said, quote, these are not my words, we gave them permission for that. So I think the media understood it as Hamas is playing police in the area right now with the U.S. permission. That was the last headline I saw up until an hour ago. I'm not sure if the fighting is still going, but I sure do hope nothing happens after that. So,
yeah, definitely. And that was something that one of the articles that I had read, that Hamas was attacking Palestinians, and so I wanted to hear what you were wanted to say on that, because that was news to me, and I obviously didn't have a chance to follow up. So interesting. So what's the next step after this? So they've signed it. They're exchanging the hostages. What's the next step in the plan? Like, what should the listeners see? Or I guess when this drops, it'll be a week from now. But what will they have seen, hopefully, in the next week or two with the plan, if it continues to move forward?
So Palestinians are coming back to Gaza. So what I'm hoping to see are more nourished population, and bodies are currently being pulled out right now from under the rubble. What I hope to see in the next couple of months are, construction companies coming in to rebuild. I'm hoping that we don't hear or see of any more clashes. And I personally hope to see an actual detailed timeline of when these 20 points will happen. The most importantly being the disarmament of Hamas. So I think that's the next big hurdle for the key stakeholders in this conflict. And I do think maybe it just hasn't been publicized yet, but I'm going to remain cautiously hopeful that, Trump's positive remarks from Egypt today are realized, and, all we can do is watch and wait and hope that neither side begins to kill each other.
Yeah, definitely. I guess the last question I want to ask to you on this is, most of the last several years, at least since I've been paying attention to the Middle East region, I would classify the Israeli-Gaza, kind of relationship as kind of a ceasefire, ongoing, but it's never been an actual at peace. I mean, the rockets were always flying. There was always tension. And I had an interview with Abdullah last week, and he said that this plan is the first one that he's seen that has the potential to actually create a peaceful Gaza region. Do you share that sentiment? Do you think that this has the potential to actually bring actual peace, or are we just going to go back to this kind of quasi somewhat peace as long as the Iron Dome holds out kind of peace? What do you think we can see from Gaza after this plan, if this plan is implemented?
So in theory, I can agree with Abdullah. It most definitely is probably one of the most feasible agreements, at least in my lifetime, that we've seen that has potential to be implemented. It was signed and solidified in Egypt with Qatar, Egypt, and Turkish leaders present. as Trump did say, it took 3,000 years, but this one's going to hold up. So I'm hoping. And, he did also mention that the hostages were let go on time. So there are little signs here and there that I think point in that direction of it actually being a moment in time where we can all just exhale. But maybe my more cynical side is just kind of waiting for another ball to drop or shoe to drop here and there of, something like the Hamas report of them attacking Palestinians. But in the grand scheme of things where, Lebanon is also trying to disarm Hezbollah, I think all of that now can work together to finally just dissolve these terrorist strongholds in that region. I definitely agree with my colleague Abdullah, and I'm hoping for the best and going to continue to monitor and see what happens.
Yeah, definitely. I'm holding out hope as well. It's difficult to just with how muddy the waters are and just everything that has the history over there. It's hard to be too excited and optimistic, but I'm hopeful that we'll start to see at least more of a peaceful region over there, because the people of Gaza, the people of Israel, they all need that. They need that peace. They need it to be able to build a future. And I'm very hopeful that this is the first step in that process. So, thank you for giving us an update there, and we'll definitely have to keep watching that. So I have one last question for you. Now, this is something you have had the opportunity to answer a couple of times, and you had some great answers for us. So the first time you said that you would make it possible for everyone to speak the same language so that they could better understand each other, that we would see each other in a more humanized way. And I thought that was an incredible answer to this question. And I say this question because all the listeners know what the question is. They hear it every week. The other one that you said was that you would you would make it so everybody could reset themselves, that you believe that most people or people in their natural state are peaceful people, and that you would reset them to a more natural state so that they would be peaceful and wouldn't be we wouldn't have all this hostility. Again, I thought that was a really, really cool answer. So I don't envy you having to follow up those two answers. But if you had the chance to continue moving us closer to liberty or opening people's eyes to liberty, what's another thing that you would do?
So I did have to think long and hard about this, but I did land on I would immediately dissolve all propaganda and all bias from everyone's minds and allow people in these conflict regions to see what's happening and see their leaders as they truly are, to kind of eliminate that blind following. And again, to promote the clear understanding, because understanding each other, like you said, both Israelis and Gazans need peace. And they need to understand that, and everybody's human. So I think the first step to that is understanding each other. That's the first step towards peace, keeping the bad actors accountable and having the genuine day-to-day, interactive diplomacy that we see.
I love it. As always, I love it. One of the things that I hate most about politics is propaganda. And obviously it happens everywhere. It happens in every relationship. It happens all over. It's just because people are who they are. But I am one of those people who is, as my wife says, honest to a fault. And I would wish that everyone could get there. Be honest to a fault, lay your cards on the table, and trust that you being honest will help others to be honest with you. I hate propaganda. It is disrespectful to the freedom and liberty of other people, because everybody has the right to know the truth of what's going on. And the person that's creating the propaganda, I'm sorry, but you are not so brilliant that you need to deceive others into believing what you want them to believe in order to gain advantage. It's a sick thing, and I don't like it at all. So I love the idea of getting rid of propaganda. Again, I don't envy you for the next time you come on, because you're never going to be able to top these three. So thank you. Lora, where can the listeners go to find more of your work?
Well, I'm currently on X at Lora Karch, and I am still, unfortunately, working on my Substack, but that's going to go live probably before the next time I'm here. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, I'll definitely have a link to your bio on X and in the show notes. So yeah, listeners, definitely go follow Lora. She's great. Hey, Lora, thank you so much for joining me and really just breaking down all this. And thank you for such a unique take on the diplomacy. You know, we a lot of times just get stuck on this idea of having to be the peace through strength, and always that kind of post World War II mentality. But there is something to be said about diplomacy, and one would say that we didn't get out of the Cold War without a whole lot of diplomacy, you know, and it did prevent a hot war, which we have to remember. And so having a world where the major powers are not talking at all is not a safe world, and it does spread down to all the other nations. And so I really enjoyed your piece. I thought it was absolutely fantastic, and I think that world leaders should pick it up and read it, because they need to hear this. You know, having that kind of dialogue can only make for a more stable world and a safer world and a freer world. And I think we need to get back to that kind of mentality. So thank you so much for joining me and just really breaking down what's going on over there and going through your piece, and just spending some time kind of walking us through all the craziness of that region. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. And I couldn't have said it better myself, Josh.
Awesome. All right, Liberty lovers, go online, check out more of Lora's work. While you're doing that, hop on over to goodmorningliberty.us and become a member of the Fed Haters Club. It is still only $7 a month, because, you know, Nate just hasn't decided to flip the switch and up that on you guys. So that's benefit for you. So go online, become a member of the Fed Haters Club. You get access to the private Discord. You get to interact live on the show every day of the week when, you know, Nate and Charlie choose to record, which, you know, sometimes they don't, but you get to when they do. You get to vote on Dumb Bleep of Week every single Friday. And of course, you might get to do a Meet the Fed Haters episode with me and actually be on the show. So go sign up and join the club. All right. Leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And if there is somebody that I need to interview that I haven't yet, send me an email and tell me about them. I want to know who I need to interview, because I want to get these great interviews out to all of you. So send me an email. You can reach me at josh@goodmorningliberty.us. Send me an email. Tell me all about them, and I will reach out to them. All right. So if you do all that, and I mean every single one of those things I just said, if you do all that, I'm going to be back next time with another exciting person that you all need to know. Until then, remember, you own your choices, each and every one. So make some good ones. I hope you all have a good night, a good day, and a good morning, Liberty.
Morning, Zoe. Got donuts.
Jeff Bridges, why are you still living above our garage?
Well, I dig the mattress, and I want to be in a T-Mobile commercial like you. Teach me, Saldana.
Oh, no, I'm not really prepared. I couldn't possibly. At T-Mobile, get the new iPhone 17 Pro. On them, it's designed to be the most powerful iPhone yet and has the ultimate pro camera system.
Wow, impressive. Let me try. T-Mobile is the best place to get iPhone 17 Pro because they've got the best network.
Nice, Jeffrey.
You heard them. T-Mobile is the best place to get the new iPhone 17 Pro on us, with eligible trade-in in any condition.
So, what are we having for lunch?
Dude, my work here is done.
With 24 monthly bill credits on Experience Beyond for well-qualified customers plus tax and $35 device connection charge. Credits end and balance due if you pay off early or cancel. Finance agreement iPhone 17 Pro, 256 gigs, $1,099.99 and new line minimum $100 plus a month plan with auto pay plus taxes and fees required. Best mobile network in the U.S. based on analysis by Ookla Speed Test Intelligence Data 1H 2025. Visit T-Mobile.com.
Have you ever brought your magic to Walt Disney World like, hey, we came to play? Did you tip your tiara to a Creole princess or get goofy officially? Step up like a boss and save the day? Or see what life's like under the tree of life? Did you? If you could. Would you? When we come through, it's true magic. 'Cause we came to play. Bring the magic at Walt Disney World Resort.
Marketing is hard. But I'll tell you a little secret. It doesn't have to be. Let me point something out. You're listening to a podcast right now, and it's great. You love the host. You seek it out and download it. You listen to it while driving, working out, cooking, even going to the bathroom. Podcasts are a pretty close companion. And this is a podcast ad. Did I get your attention? You can reach great listeners like yourself with podcast advertising from Libsyn Ads. Choose from hundreds of top podcasts offering host endorsements, or run a pre-produced ad like this one across thousands of shows to reach your target audience and their favorite podcasts with Libsyn Ads. Go to libsynads.com, that's LIBSYN, ads.com today.